Good afternoon, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It's my pleasure to welcome you to this fireside chat about the proposed 24-hour economy and Ghana's accelerated export development policy. On behalf of the UK Ghana Chamber of Commerce, UKGCC, and our partners, Palladium, UK International Development, and Bank, you're welcome and thank you for taking time to be with us this afternoon. At the UKGCC, our mission, very simply, is to foster mutually beneficial trade between Ghana and the UK. We serve as a bridge between business and policymakers, and that's why we're having this chat. We ensure that the private sector's voice is not only heard, but is heard in such a way that our needs, our wants, our desires are integrated in policy development and economic planning. Today's discussion is both timely and critical. As we all know, the 24-hour economy policy is a major plank of the new government's policy for ensuring economic growth, to boost economic productivity, and to enhance Ghana's global trade competitiveness. However, for these policies to succeed, a strong partnership is needed between us, the businesses, and the government. This is why we're here, to find common ground, to engage in a meaningful dialogue, to share insights and provide some actionable recommendations that will contribute to the effective implementation of these initiatives. We are honored to have with us Mr. Augustus Tanoh, who is the President's Special Advisor on the 24-hour economy and accelerated export development programs. You're welcome, sir. He will provide us with deeper insights into the vision, strategy, and practical implementations and implications of these policies. Our gratitude also goes to you esteemed guests from government, from the Palladium Group, from UKGCC CEOs, private sector players who've all joined us today. We particularly want to mention the Palladium Group's Jobs for Economic Transformation program and Bank for their support. Thank you, sir. And of course, special appreciation goes to Mr. Tanoh for taking time off of his schedule. As we engage in this discussion, I encourage you all to share in this discussion with your thoughts openly. Let us use this platform to identify challenges, propose solutions, explore collaborative pathways, and to make the 24-hour economy and export development policies work for businesses and work for Ghana's economic transformation. Once again, thank you for being here. I look forward to a productive and insightful conversation. Welcome.
Ladies and gentlemen, we can do better than that by showing appreciation to Mr. John Kufuor. Indeed, he has set the tone and explained to us why we are here to talk about a very, very critical economic policy of this administration and what they hope to turn things around for the economy and your business as well. Let me also welcome Mr. Eugene Samote, is the team lead Palladium UK's Ghana's Job for Economic Transformation program. If he's here to give us another remark, please. With a round of applause, let's welcome him, please.
Good afternoon, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. I'd want to acknowledge and stand on all protocols already observed and make a few remarks on this very esteemed occasion at this fireside chat. It's a pleasure to note that the presidential advisor for the 24 economy is also here with us today. And I'm really keen to hear all the exciting conversations and deliberations that we have today to provide more insight into the ambition of the 24 Economy Secretariat. At this point in time, I would like you to just cast your mind wide and imagine a Ghana where every citizen in this country has the opportunity for a better life, where value is created from and also added to our abundant natural resources, and where this nation achieves a net exporter status of finished manufactured products, where quality jobs are abundant, including for women and girls. Thanks to the strategic partnership and support from the UK, we are very confident of co-creating and charting a unique industrialization pathway on this developmental journey with the government of Ghana through its Jobs and Economic Transformation Program, implemented in partnership with key government of Ghana institutions like the Ministry of Trade and Industry, Agribusiness and Industry, Ghana Investment Promotion Center, Ghana Standards Authority, and more recently, the Secretariat of the 24 Economy. The UK Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office is supporting the government of Ghana with private sector to address key constraints within the business environment in an aim to spur this much needed growth. Our mission is really to contribute to improving the chance of a better life for Ghanaian citizens by supporting economic transformation and the creation of quality jobs in up to 5 of the government of Ghana's strategic manufacturing sectors, which are the textile and garments, agro-processing, pharmaceuticals, automotive, and light manufacturing. JET aims to spare £120 million of investment into manufacturing investments, driving frontier shift and innovation within the priority manufacturing sectors, thereby contributing to the creation of at least 7,000 jobs within the next 18 months. Quite ambitious, but we have made a lot of progress so far. To give an overview of the potential of these focus sectors I've just mentioned, the textile and garment and pharmaceutical industry specifically could create about 30,000 jobs within the next 5 years, given the targeted support and interventions by the government. This has the potential to unlock nearly £100 million of additional investments, creating new markets for Ghana-made products and services, as well as accelerating economic growth. These data are backed by a recent assessment conducted by the JET program on the potential of these sectors to contribute to the 24-hour economic growth and development agenda of the government. Notwithstanding the enormous potential of these sectors, key bottlenecks remain and are further exacerbated by the increasing cost of manufacturing, the displacement of existing manufacturing capacity, and the comparative disadvantage in FDI inflows compared to neighboring countries within the region. These critical issues need addressing. Additionally, regulatory and policy constraints continue to impact on the growth and potential of the manufacturing ecosystem. To provide a better understanding of these key challenges from a private sector lens, the JET program collaborated with the UK-Ghana Chamber of Commerce to undertake the Business Environment and Competitiveness Survey. I am very pleased to share that this survey, on this occasion, with JET's guidance, the manufacturing sector was also surveyed for the first time, and key findings and recommendations documented in this report. This fireside chat has actually been made possible by the joint efforts of the UK GCC and other partners, including the JET program. It is interesting to note that the policy and regulatory frameworks were among the least rated components by respondents of this survey. Please note that this is the perspective coming directly from the private sector and is noteworthy for policymakers. The key question in these challenging times, therefore, is how do we, in a very harmonized and concerted approach, backed by deep-seated evidence, support to unlock the economic potential of the manufacturing sector and, by extension, other sectors of the economy, thereby creating sustainable growth and job creation. I would like to illustrate the transformation that occurs when policy meets private sector interest. When you drive up the Spintex road, you will notice very clearly this growing female-led company with a full-blown research and development unit that is driving innovation in electric mobility empowering dreams of young men and women to achieve independence financially and also to be self-sustaining. Driven by the burgeoning policy environment, firms like these can innovate and create employment as well as drive prosperity for all. Similarly, if you look at the garment sector, an unprecedented 4 million units of personal protective equipment were manufactured in Ghana for the first time at the peak of COVID. This goes to show that it is really possible if policy interfaces very well with private sector interests. Accordingly, 3 policy proposals for 24-hour industrial sector and investment for economic transformation, namely textile and garment manufacturing policy, the pharmaceutical manufacturing policy, and automotive components manufacturing policy, have been drafted with technical assistance from the JET program. The proposals provide a portfolio of sector-specific interventions. I'll just name a few. Under textile and garment, you'll see linkages to local demand. And I was just having a conversation with someone earlier on, and we talked about where the demand is. We say there is 70% of pharmaceutical need is met by import. So there is demand, but how do we merge the demand versus production, right? So these are contained in some of these sector policy proposals that we have drafted with support of the government as well. And it also includes a SME acceleration fund, an ESG compliance certification, which is critical for sectors like textile and garments, and expansion of industrial infrastructure in special economic zones, without which it becomes absolutely impossible. I mean, we look at smaller economies like our neighbors, Benin and Togo, how they are transforming from cotton, from the farm to the shelf. This very unique product or crop that they have, it's because they have been able to attract investment into special economic zones. That is a key game changer for them. In pharmaceuticals, we touch on the World Health Organization good manufacturing practice, which is paramount. If you want to attract or you want to unlock international supply chain, you need this GMP certification and compliance before you can even be considered to tender. All right, and we are actually exploring also, as part of the policy proposals, facilitating importer to manufacturer partnerships. Those who are importing the 70%, can we have a conversation with those who are producing the 30% locally so that we kind of shift the dynamics in between? Currently, the JET program is really undertaking a robust analysis when it comes to the pharmaceutical sector of the investment opportunity and potential to manufacture APIs, that is the active pharmaceutical ingredients, in Ghana, covering the West Africa, clearly because that is where the initial demand will be. And I'll be very excited to share that outcome with key stakeholders in this room as well. In conclusion, considering the benefits to the Ghanaian economy, we would like to request for these policies to be prioritized, to be finalized, to be passed, and announced very soon. JET is keen to explore support to the government of Ghana, including recent interactions with the 24 Economy Secretariat, and use a portfolio of approaches, including roadshows, to achieve this ambition. We therefore propose a strategic partnership with the Ghanaian government to implement these interventions, which are expected to result in tangible economic and social benefits under Ghana's 24-hour economy policy within this current administration, while laying the foundation for long-term industrial transformation. Thank you very much.
Another round of applause for Mr. Eugene Samote. He's team lead at Palladium UK, Ghana's job for economic transformation. And I'll call him always Uncle Guzi. The businesses are ready for you. So it looks like they are ready to take off. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, how could I have forgotten our host or where we are right now? Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, let me welcome the Deputy Managing Director of CalBank, Johnson Owari, to give his remarks. A round of applause for him, please.
The opportunity of being a host, the benefit is to get opportunity to also make a few remarks. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I must confess that I don't know much about the 24-hour economy. So it's a good time to be here. I hear others call it work without end. And I stumbled on some information, interestingly, about a study that said that about 40% of employed Americans happen to work in the 24-hour economy, which means that this is quite serious business. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure, on behalf of management and staff, to welcome you all to this topical conversation taking place right here in the beautiful auditorium of CalBank. Today presents a great opportunity for those of us gathered here to unpack the government's flagship program of 24-hour economy. Our goal is to explore how we can collectively leverage on this policy to drive sustainable growth. It is refreshing that this engagement is happening here at CalBank. As Ghana's independent and indigenous bank, leading bank, CalBank is deeply committed to supporting policies and initiatives that fuel accelerated growth and development of the local economy. Over the years, we have built a strong foundation to enable us to harness opportunities for such impactful growth ideas. Ladies and gentlemen, as we engage in today's discussion, I will encourage all of us to be very active in this particular discussion. And it's important to note also that as CalBank, we have led this country in the area of digital innovation. And by so doing, we are having a mobile app as the leading app in the banking sector. And we'll encourage all of you who are here to try and download it. My colleagues here will help you to have a test of this superior delivery of technology. My colleagues will help you on this. Indeed, our commitment to innovation aligns perfectly with the vision of a vibrant, round-the-clock economy. Ladies and gentlemen, I will be rounding up by requesting that we make this a vibrant discussion within the CalBank auditorium. I wish to extend my gratitude to the UK-Ghana Chamber of Commerce for the instrumental role in bringing together today's 24-hour economy discussion. I wish to also extend same to the 24-hour Economy Secretariat for accepting to bring this engagement here. Finally, I wish to assure you that CalBank is very excited to do its part in terms of business support to ensure that whatever is discussed here is actually practicalized. I therefore wish to encourage you to connect with our relationship managers who are present here today so that we can all move our beloved country forward together. Thank you very much. You are welcome once again.
A round of applause for our host, Mr. Johnson Owari. He's the Deputy Managing Director of CalBank. And Mr. Tanoh, it appears that the banks started the 24-hour thing first, too, when they were offering us an ATM machine, total banking. You can drive to the ATM anytime you want at CalBank and then access your money. So a round of applause for our commercial bank, seeing the light way before. And now this government is championing this policy. Now, who is going to be our special guest for this evening? well, let me invite Mr. Stephen Gray, who will be his member of the UK GCC UK-based advisory board. Let's welcome him to introduce our special guest for this evening. Round of applause for him, please.
Thank you very much. Well, I'm not sure I can add much more to what has already been said about Augustus Tanoh. He's a Ghanaian politician, a lawyer, a diplomat, and a businessman known for his deep involvement in Ghana's political and economic development. Mr. Tanoh is widely respected for his integrity, analytical depth, and long-standing commitment to public service. He's often regarded as a politician with technocratic orientation, blending policy expertise with grassroots sensibility. Those are the qualities that we need for business to hear and respond to the 24-hour economy. Today, he joins us as the presidential advisor on the 24-hour economy and the Accelerated Export Development Program. And if I could invite Mr. Tanoh to the stage. Thank you very much. I give you the floor.
All right. Thank you very much to our hosts, CalBank, and to UK GCC for inviting us and the Palladium Group. I am glad to inform you that the 24-hour economy is not just about streetlights and night markets. It's much more than that. And for us to get a fuller appreciation of the rollout of the program, its content, and what it aims to achieve, we will do a short presentation, and hopefully that will invoke a very lively discussion, contributions that we can take away and refine even better the program that we have. So without saying too much, you notice we don't come into the newspapers very much. Other people speak much more than the Secretariat because we believe very much in action and not so much words. But at this point in time, it's important to educate the public, to share with you what we believe is the path forward to a real transformation, not just talk transformation, but actionable, deliverable transformation. So I'll invite our head of strategy, program development, and execution to join us and make the presentation. We have with us as well our head of innovative finance, partnership, and markets. He's here with us. And I believe a couple of others are out. The executive assistant, PA, media manager, social media manager is around, and a whole host of you. Good to see you. Thank you. And Mr. Kwame Fojo, who's an advisor, technical advisor. Thank you. Please hold on.
Thanks a lot. Good afternoon, or is it good evening? Can I please get the presentation back on? Okay, great. Is there a clicker that I can use to go through it, or you control it over there for me? You control it for me, okay, so you can go to the next one and then. All right, this is just telling you about our logo. I see a lot of people have, people come to us with different kinds of logo. We'll put the logo that you saw out there very soon so that people can use it if you want to reference the 24-hour economy. But just like Mr. Tanoh said when he started talking, a lot of people think of the 24-hour economy as, the night economy. And that's for good reason. It's for good reason because often when you Google 24-hour economy, what you see is 24-hour economy referencing cities, right? So the examples you often see are about cities. And these are cities that look at igniting their night economy and ensuring that, they have a vibrant night economy. So it makes sense that a lot of Ghanaians think about the 24-hour economy, and then what comes to mind is also the night economy. But we think about the 24-hour economy a lot differently. So it's not just about the ninth economy, but we think of it in terms of an economic transformation. So why do we believe that we need this economic transformation? I think, hello? Okay, so let's talk about the objectives first. So what we are trying to achieve with the 24-hour economy. The first thing is we want to significantly increase input self-reliance and reduce Ghana's vulnerability to external shocks. Now, this is important because when you take a look at our economy, you know, in analyzing the economy, we basically came to the conclusion that the Ghanaian economy is deformed. And it's deformed because, and it's no secret, right, that if you take a look at our economy, we are largely exporters of raw primary commodities, gold, oil, cocoa to some extent, right, and import almost everything else. And what is surprising is we import even stuff that we produce, we export and we import them. And we import both for consumption and also for our industry. So you look at the data, more than 50% of what we actually use as inputs in our industry is imported. And yet, a lot of what we produce is consumed in Ghana. We don't export as much. So we are largely just exporting raw primary commodities, where even in those commodities, the real beneficiaries are not necessarily Ghanaian or the Ghanaian economy. Okay, so you have a situation where we have this circular loop where we're depending on imports, we're depending on foreign currencies, and everything that we do goes to reinforce the problem that we are in. And that's why the very first objective of our transformation is to increase input self-reliance and also reduce the vulnerability of our economy to external shocks. Then we are looking at also facilitating a comprehensive integration of value chains to produce more of what we need. So that problem that I described, you know, the way you also see it is the fact that you don't have an integrated value chain. You don't have integrations along value chains and across value chains. You know, so we'll produce primary products, it gets exported, and even when we need to then reuse those, we import the raw materials. So you don't have integration across and along value chains, and so you don't have, you know, growth in one part of the economy, stimulating growth in other parts of the economy. You are not getting all of that. So the way we are thinking about all of this is we need to adopt an integrated value chain approach, right? So that when we look at stimulating the economy, we are not only looking at just a small part of it, but we look at how does it affect the whole economy. So from production to processing, you know, to the market, you know, that's how we're looking at it. And that's why we're talking about facilitating a comprehensive integration of value chains, right? To ensure that we are stimulating the economy, growth in another part of one part of the economy affects other parts of the economy, and it's all along the value chain. And number 3 is to optimize the utilization of production resources, including human labor power, natural resources, and capital to achieve high productivity, shared prosperity, and more balanced lives. This is perhaps where the 24-hour economy comes in, right? Where people think of it as 24-hour economy. So you're looking at optimizing productivity, optimizing the use of all the resources that we have, right? So think of it as not having any idle capacity. Every idle capacity that we have, we'll utilize it, okay? We'll utilize the natural resources we have, the time that we have, and we have 24 hours in a day. So perhaps that's where you can talk about 24-hour economy. We make sure that we utilize all the 24 hours within the day. And of course, we're also looking at increasing the volumes and types of production. So it's not just volume of production. So when you think of production transformation, we are looking at increasing the volume of production, but we're also looking at increasing the quality of production, right? And of course, the goal there is to create jobs. And our target is to create 1.7 million jobs within the next 4 years. Then to develop stable production surpluses based on marketing that scientifically assesses and penetrates concrete local, regional, and international markets. Right? Exports is a big part of this but we want to do it in a way that ensures that we are generating surpluses and exporting the surpluses, and not exporting what we also need. You have situations where, for instance, look at the rubber industry. We are barely producing enough rubber to feed our industry, and yet most of the rubber that we are producing, we are exporting and killing industry. We need to get to a stage where we're producing enough to feed ourselves, to feed our industries, and then to be able to export the surpluses. And the sixth one is equip the Ghanaian productive sector with better attitudes to production and production relations and social. So this is really about improving the mindsets, improving people's skill sets, and ensuring that you have the population that is equipped to be a useful part of the 24-hour economy. So that's the objective. Let's go to the next one. All right, so this really what I was telling you. The thing that's striking over here is the fact that trade and repairs has become the biggest contributor to our GDP. You know, it used to be agric. Manufacturing used to be number 3. Manufacturing is today number 4. Its contribution is going down. Agric's contribution to our GDP is going down. Trade and repairs is going up. It's now about 30%. And it's mostly trade in imported commodities, right? Hello. And this looks at food imports. And it's significant that, you know, the number 2 and number 3, I was surprised at this, is yemuadie, you know, animal stomachs and bladders and guts. You know, that was actually very interesting to me. Number 3 is chicken, cats, and the offal of fowl, you know, the gizzards and all of that we eat. Right? So these are things that we can produce here. The question you ask yourself is, why are we importing everything here? If you look at this top 10 food imports, most of these are things that, if we put our houses in order, could actually be produced in this country. And if you think about this problem, the problem is not the fact that we import. That's not necessarily the problem. But the problem is that the economy has been designed to import and for growth to not necessarily stimulate growth across the country. So you actually have situations where you have jobless growth, right? So you're seeing growth in the economy, but it's not creating prosperity and it's not creating the jobs for your people. That is the problem. So the import and all of that is how you see the problem, but it's really the way the economy is designed, you know, that makes that happen, and that leads to the fact that we are not creating the jobs even when the economy is growing. Please go. Yeah, so you see the jobless growth over here. You actually see this GDP going up. So this GDP in current USD going up, and the ratio of employment to the population actually on a downward trend. That's a situation that we can't have continue. We need to be able to reverse that situation. And that's what the 24-hour economy is. Ensure that we achieve the economic transformation that drives growth within the economy, but that drives the growth that actually benefits Ghanaians, creates jobs and creates prosperity for the people. That's what the 24-hour economy is. Next. All right, let's go to the next one. I've already talked about the fact that we are adopting an integrated value chain approach. The general principles with which the 24-hour economy is Secretariat is going to operate is that the Secretariat will be more of, will play a coordinating role. Okay. So if you look at the structure, the 24-hour economy sits in the office of the president. There's a Secretariat that's headed by a coordinator, and that Secretariat then tries to coordinate all the different government departments and ministries to pursue the programs that ensure that we achieve this transformation. And this is important because as part of the consultations that has gone on to develop the program, we realized there are a lot of really good programs scattered around different government ministries. The problem, though, is that they are not talking to each other and you are not seeing them benefit each other. And so one of the main roles that we are playing is to ensure that we are coordinating, we are taking stock of all of this, coordinating and ensuring that the different ministries work together in order to be able to achieve their objectives. The other thing to note is that we will also be pursuing specific programs, we call them sub-programs, that are meant to ignite the shift within the economy that we are looking for. Okay, and these programs are going to be private sector driven. So we, as much as possible, the funding for these programs is going to come from the private sector. It's going to focus on the needs of the private sector, and it's not, what we would then do is to advocate for the kind of environment that the private sector needs to succeed and to get that to happen so the private sector can succeed. So that's really the general principles with which we will be operating. This is our theory of change. We are looking at building a self-reliant, industrially competitive, and export-driven Ghanaian economy with fully integrated value chains that is characterized by efficient market systems, a globally competitive workforce, and strong regional and global trade integration, resulting in sustainable, inclusive growth, decent jobs, reduced import dependency, and increased resilience to external shocks. There are 3 transformation pillars that we are looking at here. And these 3 transformation pillars also drive the sub-program that you're going to see. So the first transformation pillar is the production transformation. And when you think of production transformation, it's basically to transform our agric and industrial sector, especially manufacturing, so that we are able to produce what we require. We're able to, both for food and also for our industry, and to generate surpluses that we can export. And then there's the market systems enhancement, which looks at improving the supply chains and improving markets so that it's more efficient. Now, oftentimes, what you realize is at the farm gates, we are competitive. By the time you move from farm gates to markets, or farm gate or factory gate to markets, we become uncompetitive. A big part of that is the inefficiencies within the supply chains. So the market systems, supply chain and market systems enhancement looks at improving the supply chains and ensuring that we have a lot more efficient supply chains. Then you have the human capital development, which focuses on the human capital that we have, building the people with the right skills and the right mindset to be able to drive what we are. So those are the 3 transformation pillars that we are going to build everything under. The sub-programs that I spoke about, there are 7 of them that you find over here. So these are the ones that we are designing, that we are going to execute with the support of the private sector and hopefully with the support of the members of UKGCC. First one is a value chain financing program. The thing with the value chain financing program is we recognize that finance is a major constraint, access to finance is a major constraint to business growth in Ghana. And, it's a major constraint for 2 main reasons. One is the cost of accessing finance, right? It's extremely high for entrepreneurs and businesses. The other thing that we realize is that the requirements for collateral makes it really difficult for even people who otherwise would have been able to access the finance and still be able to pay the high rates to even access finance. And so the idea is to build a financing program that allows businesses to access finance at a cheap cost or at a reduced cost. And to this end, we are working with a number of partners to take out some structural problems that we identified. So the first part of this is sourcing the funding. How do we get funding, to build this facility? And we've spoken to some development finance institutions. The idea is to get long-term concessionary financing. We are targeting about 3%. My good friend there is laughing because we're targeting long-term concessionary financing. The members of the Arab Coordinating Group have actually signed an MOU, and we are working with them at raising about 500 million USD. There are others that we are talking to, but that a conversation. So the Italian, under the Mattei plan, are also looking to provide about 150 million euros. We would love to also get something from the UK. We met with the UK the High Commissioner, the UK High Commissioner and her team. We still haven't made any headway in getting the UK to finance it, but I see that the UK business people are here. The financiers from UK are here. So we would love to get about 100 to 200 million from the UK government to also support this. But in all, the target is to get about 1 billion USD concessionary long-term financing. We've engaged the Bank of Ghana to help hedge away the FX risk, because a big part of the cost of this would be the FX risk. And at this stage, the Bank of Ghana is looking at what are the different ways to do it, because a major constraint to them in doing this is the IMF program that we are under. Okay, so they're looking at how do we get around that and get the IMF to approve the swap that they intend to do, so they can start working on this swap to hedge away the FX risk. Then, so once we hedge away the FX risk, we also need to think about how do we make sure that we de-risk the beneficiaries. So part of what we are asking for from the Arab Coordinating Group and also from the Italians is a technical assistance grant. And we want to use this technical assistance grant to do a number of things. First, we want to organize beneficiaries of these loans or this facility into cooperatives, trade associations, industry associations, who are self-regulating and who can then also support with positively influencing their members. And then through these associations, we can provide the training and the capacity building that potential beneficiaries require. So that's one of the things that we are looking at doing. We're also looking at using this technical assistance grant to provide monitoring and sourcing, so basically helping identify people, also monitoring the facilities, and also building a scoring platform that we are going to use to assess potential beneficiaries. So those are the things that we are looking at to help to de-risk the potential beneficiaries. And then we're putting together a market access program to also provide offtake for the people who get into that program. So it's a comprehensive look at the structural issues of access to finance and looking at how do we solve it, and not just providing, because the solutions to date have always been providing, guarantees, or providing subsidies or subsidizing the loans, right? We are looking at how do you take away the risk itself, so that it becomes long-term. Then we have the agricultural production program. Here we've identified some specific value chains, and how we identified them was looking at one, our import bill when it comes to food. Where do we spend the most? Looking at the weight of these items in the food inflation basket, and then how much it affects other value chains, right? So based on that, we selected some specific value chains, and we are looking at setting up agro-eco parks. Right now, there are about 47 of them that we are targeting. We're working with some infrastructure developers to build an SPV that develop these agro-eco parks. They are going to be built around the existing irrigation facilities. And this will then provide a complete chain of, the different businesses that you require within that enclave. Well, it's not necessarily an enclave, that park, to make these businesses, these farms succeed. So you have a farmer service center in each of these parks that provides extension services, that provides mechanization, to the farmers, that provides, 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 that pro farm inputs to the farmers, right? So you have all of that. And then you have processing centers in a lot of these places. Then we have a manufacturing growth program which focuses on 4 key sectors. So the 4 key sectors are agro-processing, textiles, pharmaceuticals, and machinery and technology. The idea of machinery and technology is so that we will be able to produce at least the basic tools and implements that we require. Right? So metal fabrication, plastics, wood, and being able to basically develop the simple, threshers, the plows, and all of the things that we require in our farms. Even aboboya, if we're able to produce aboboya here, we don't need to go to China to import aboboya. Then we have the supply chain and market efficiency program, which looks at making the supply chains a lot more efficient. One element of this that I'll mention is that we are looking at developing inland water transportation. Okay, and the Volta Lake is a critical part of this inland water transportation that we are looking at. Why is this important? It's important because water transport is significantly cheaper. We are told it's about 1/8 the cost of transporting things by road. So water transport, rail transport are important to the strategy to ensure that we're able to build better transportation systems. Then we have a culture, arts, and tourism program. It's actually built around an idea that came out of some engagements that we had with experts in the creative arts sector. And the idea is called, What's Your Ghana Story? So we're building a program around this idea of What's Your Ghana Story that will, first of all, ensure that everything that we do, there's a certain Ghana story in it, right? So this CAL building, we will ask, what is your Ghana story? What is Ghanaian, within the CAL, this CAL head office? But eventually, everything that Ghanaians do, we need to be very conscious about thinking, what is the Ghana story in this? To demonstrate our diversity. And the whole point of the program is to drive the export of our culture. That's really the whole point. And so there will be a part also around supporting storytellers to be able to tell the Ghana story, bringing back the community centers that we used to have. And there's one other thing that we are bringing back. So it's the community centers and something else. I'll remember that. Festivals. So festivals, a lot of festivals spread around the country that people don't really actually notice, right? So bringing back the festivals and the community centers and trying to put them together so these becomes attractions for tourism and for people to both local tourism and international tourism. Then we have Aspire 24, which looks at the mindset and skill sets of our people. A critical component there that we're actually pursuing right now is to mainstream the mainstream IT skills or digital intelligence within the TVET system. So in trying to get that done, we've engaged the TVETs, we've engaged some international development partners who are willing to support us to develop the curriculums and do the pilots within the TVET system. And as part of the pilots, build some IT centers of excellence in some TVET schools. The idea is, if we're able to mainstream it within the TVET system, if we're able to mainstream this within the TVET system, we bring digital intelligence closer to the people and everybody everywhere can get access to it. Then finally, we have the Go Ghana 24 program, which is really a mobilization program to mobilize our people around the 24-hour economy and around solving our problems. These are the value chains. Please go to the next one. Okay, next one. Okay, this is the value chain financing. Please go to the next one. All right, so there are a number of proposals we've also made for institutional and legislative changes to support the 24-hour economy. We've put some of them here. So the first one is to rationalize the local content rules by amending the GIPC Act, the PPA Act, and some local government laws. So we're making some specific proposals around local content and how we can project the Made in Ghana agenda a lot more by amending some of these laws. We proposed the merger of the Ghana Enterprise Agency and NEIP into one body for it to be a lot more efficient and make better use of resources. We've proposed the replacement of Cooperative Society Acts by a new comprehensive act that is in line with, it's actually built along the lines of what the AU proposes. Because the current cooperative acts we have is not fit for what we want to do. It doesn't allow worker cooperatives and so many other things. And basically, it views cooperatives just as it views, businesses under the Companies Act. We want something different. And it's important because cooperatives are going to be a critical part of our strategy. We're looking at the Free Zones Act to emphasize the development of local value chains and special economic zones. So to this end, we've actually reviewed the special economic zones bill, and we're making specific proposals for changes to see some of the things that we want to. And then, of course, amending the Labor Act to address the basis for calculating minimum wage. We want to start thinking about work not in terms of my daily wages, but in terms of my hourly wages, so that the concept of productivity is a lot more emphasized in there. So today we talk about daily minimum wage. We should be talking about hourly minimum wage, not daily minimum wage. So these are all other things. We are like GRA, SEPS Acts, electricity tariffs, the reviewing the regulations around the maximum allowable outages, and then the single window clearance system for imports and export. So, and that's my final slide. So we've talked about the fact that the 24-hour economy is private sector focused, right? So what do we want from the private sector? What will we want you to support us with? So number one, we are designing a governance infrastructure that will include the private sector. Once the program is approved and comes out, it will become clear what we mean by that. But there will be private sector representation on governing the things that we're actually going to do. So the program, the way we execute the programs and everything, we've actually designed a governance, infrastructure that has representation from the private sector and ensures that the private sector's voice is represented. We've talked about the fact that most of the financing will come from the private sector. So there we will be coming to you to help us, identify what are the places where we can mobilize funding to support your own kind, to be successful. Then the program will seek to create investable opportunities in strategic value chains. So that's fine. And then we also want to encourage the formation of industry, trade associations, industry associations, cooperatives. Because we believe that in organizing, what you provide is you provide a platform for businesses to learn from each other, for them to have stronger bargaining power, Because if you're organized, you have stronger bargaining power. You can access, different facilities a lot better, be it markets, be it financing. And then it also becomes easier to engage, right, if businesses are organized. And part of the way we are going to provide support is we'll be providing support to identifiable, business organizations, not necessarily to individual businesses. So we encourage that you think about how we organize, businesses into, industry associations and also to cooperatives to ensure that we're able to engage better and support you to achieve the objective of the 24-hour economy. I think that's about it. Next one. Yes, we're done. So thank you very much, and hopefully we get this, all the support.
A round of applause for Abdul. And after this presentation, some will say maybe all the questions might have been answered, but still further clarifications are very necessary. I'll now hand over the mic to Mr. Gray to have a quick one-on-one chat conversations whilst they also invite your questions. Mr. Greg, it's over to you, please.
Thank you very much. And I know I spoke to a number of you before this session. I think some of the perceptions have been completely destroyed by that last presentation. So I would like to thank the presenter for a very informed set of slides on that. Mr. Tanoh, that was, I'm blown away by that presentation, to be honest. But I'm also sort of look at that and look about whether there's an internalization of investment in Ghana through some of these policies, you know, with foreign investors having an important role to play in growing the Ghana economy. How do you see the foreign investor role in the 24-hour economy initiative?
Can you hear me now? Wonderful. There is room, this is predominantly and almost entirely a private sector program. It gives us the opportunity, first of all, to restructure the private sector along value chains that achieve greater self-reliance for our economy. But in doing so, we need private capital from both domestic and external. And if you look at the agroecological zones, where you will have both farm activity, generation of farm produce, a nearby processing facility, a distribution component, and so on. To be able to raise that level of capital, you require both internal as well as external capital. And the idea is that in making these propositions, we need to streamline the tax regimes so that they are real incentives without in any way militating or diminishing government's rapacious desire for revenue. But, you know, the reality is that if you're able to generate more production, more output, achieve greater productivity, at the end of the day, and create more jobs, at the end of the day, government becomes the beneficiary of greater revenue. But if you try and stifle production by margins and levels of taxes, that become counterintuitive and counterproductive to the expansion drive, then you're really not going anywhere, you're going backwards. And in our interaction with a lot of the trade industries, associations, JET and so on, one of the problems, of course, or three of the problems, if I may say so, are the incidence of taxes, the impact on cash flow, and the impact on costs and price competitiveness, energy costs, and also the bureaucratization of processes for approvals, where one agency should be enough. You have 19 agencies being responsible for different facets of the same, basically, approval process. So part of the work of the 24-hour economy is basically to try and get us out of this crisis and this vice. And in looking at our agroecological zones, for instance, you'll find that the infrastructure component, which will be mainly solar power, renewable energy sources, the irrigation systems will be mainly driven by solar pumps, whether it's gravity, whether it's sprinkler systems or pivot systems or whatever. And also the road systems and so on will basically, third-class roads basically will be as much as possible sourcing from what we have on the ground. But private capital from abroad is welcome and will be needed. We know that the pension funds are sitting on, 63 billion cedis of cash. So one of the challenges for the banking system is how do we structure without putting people's pensions at risk, as we've seen in the last few years, in a way that they can then benefit from greater margins of returns, so they can then begin also to pay up to aging populations that is emerging in Ghana and generate annuity funds that have the sufficient coverage for those who are entering the retirement period. So there's a lot to do. There's a lot of private capital in Ghana, by the way. Some of it is hidden under pillows because they're not quite sure what the government will do. But I believe that we need to, part of the education process will be for Ghanaians, not only here, but Ghanaians abroad, to invest in their economy. And I believe that if Ghanaians are investing in their economy, then those from outside will see that there's confidence and then will follow in train to invest in the value chains that we've described. It's not enough to grow agriculture at 2.8%. Because what you're saying basically, especially if you have a Sahelian geographical situation which is coming south because of climate and deforestation and so on. If you're growing at 2.8%, you're basically saying that the future generation of Ghanaians are going to starve and going to be hungry because your population growth is 2.5%. So your margin of 0.3% for agriculture is a dangerous level, especially because you may end up having also to feed the Sahelian who are coming further south. So our strategy has to be a West African context, 425 million people. Our food sufficiencies must lead to surpluses so that we can generate support for industry in terms of raw materials and export of both primary and finished products within the sub-region and also to other traditional markets in Europe and now increasingly to Asia and South Asia. Thank you.
Just for those in the room, to give you a sense of the size of the market in the agro space and the changes that sub-Saharan Africa has faced. 40 years ago, the trade balance in agri-produce was zero with the rest of the world. By 2022, that had increased to a deficit of $77 billion. And by the end of this year, it's expected to be $111 billion. That's the market potential that this initiative is talking to. But you talk about private sector programs, and private sector need reliability and predictability in the business environments. And often I've heard over the years in Ghana the complaints of government is too deeply in the business of business. How is that going to change moving forward?
Well, if you fall into the kind of crisis that we've fallen into, debt levels around $84 billion, growth rates that are really on the margin based on what we have to do, 4 or 5% per annum. And the fact that the government itself is stuck with a debt overhang and can barely invest in the economy, you have no other alternative but to look at the private sector. And looking at the private sector, if you wish to get the private sector to be activated and to invest in our value chains, for instance, then you have, of necessity, to create that environment and remove government from some of the areas that it's tried to intervene in. Of course, we have a state commercial sector, which hasn't done too well. I'm sure they've been in the news, where they basically use up government resources to create lost positions on their balance sheets. Hopefully that will change. There is room for the state commercial sector. And in our classification, the state commercial sector and the cooperative movement are seen as private sector because they have to operate commercially. So we are looking at those areas where immediately we can get government to be more efficient and as a facilitator and enabler. So tax, energy, and more friendly bureaucracies and more systemized, rationalized approval mechanisms that do not end up with people having to wait for a year just to get a piece of paper to start working and to do business. And in some cases, sometimes, because it takes so long, they just pack their bags and leave and go to Ivory Coast or to Gambia or to Benin and so on and so forth. So you're right, government has to do better. And part of our work in the 24-hour Secretariat is to point this out, push and lobby for the removal of some of these things that basically create a situation where government is not really doing very well in terms of promoting business, but rather militating against the growth and expansion of business and private capital.
Thank you. Before we go and focus on the export, well, last side, just looking at the legislative frameworks that's being proposed there, how do you see the challenges of the silos that we can sometimes see within governments and ensuring that there is a joined-up approach and making sure that the different changes in legislation that are necessary are happening in the right order at the right time?
Well, so this is a priority program, and it's a flagship program. I believe that we have probably a strong voice to try and get that integrated approach to resolving our problems and pushing growth in the value chains that we have mentioned. So initially, our target in terms of removing bottlenecks, getting legislation that is appropriate for the growth of these value chains, will be specifically to those value chains. But as we evolve, those other components that require that we promote growth and expansion and promote private sector comfort and the enabling realities that make it possible for the private sector to feel that they can invest in a predictable environment is something that we will definitely address. But for the moment, what we can do are those areas that relate to raw material imports, the contradiction between working the free zone and then having to supply to Ghanaians beyond the 30%, and then having for people to pay taxes that eventually lead them to be less competitive than the finished product that is being imported. Those issues have to be addressed. Situations where companies are outside capital cities, but then they're being denied exemptions simply because the mechanisms for their original approvals, they don't address the fact that they belong to a different tax regime. The minor things, but they're important because they are the factors that determine whether businesses will make the investment decision or decline to make the investment decision to operate in this environment. You know, problems about the port and customs, where you have a multiplicity of problems in relation to approvals and so on, the number of places that you have to go before you can clear, importers for raw materials suffering demurrage because of bureaucracy, a lot of corruption. Those are things that we have to address frontally so that we can get people not to leave Ghana and go to Togo because of the free port system, but stay in Ghana because we streamlined it. And the single clearing window is one way in which we believe government can facilitate business. I mean, you have a situation where somebody will come to Cal Bank, apply for an IDF, provide the correct invoice for transfer to a supplier, but the customs don't know basically the amount of money that was transferred by the bank because there's no interface between Cal Bank and customs. So when that import comes and the values are underdeclared, they're underdeclared. And for some analysis that has been done, about 68% of the goods that come into Ghana are underdeclared in terms of value. So we're really getting 32% of what we should be getting by way of revenue at the ports. Now, if you're able to generate that level of revenue, then of course the imperative to add more and more tax to the extent that you have an effective rate of VAT at 22%, which is a complete disincentive, then becomes possible to lower it to more reasonable levels, to the old levels of 17.5%, and make it more manageable and tolerable for businesses to grow. And so there are a lot of irrationalities, and the idea is for government to push to get those out of the way so that growth can occur, more predictability, a more incentivized environment than a punishment environment, which we have seen over the last few years. I mean, people believe that Ghanaian government is there to punish and not to incentivize, and we need to reverse that reputation.
No, for sure. And sounds like there's a job for our members as well in terms of their declarations. Just moving to the export side of things, Ghana enjoys duty-free access to the European Union, UK, and currently America under the AGOA system. But where does Ghana see the opportunities for new markets, and what trade agreements are you focusing on bilateral tax treaties?
The international market is looking constricted by the day. You've seen the tariff wars that are beginning to emerge with the emergence of Mr. Trump and his program. The tariffs against Canada, Mexico. there's a net benefit for us, but how long that will stay is a matter of conjecture, because Mr. Trump basically seems to derive policy from his mood. And I'll say this. I'm sure a lot of you know that because of the tariffs against Chinese companies, a lot of them have resorted to what they call nearshoring, moving to countries where they can produce goods and services, both for the domestic economy as well as export, who are not basically bound by tariff barriers that they are bound by. And they did that in Mexico, and that's probably part of the reason why the Americans are very upset with Mexico. But Ghana can take advantage of that. But beyond the foreign investor coming in because they want to be able to clear border taxes that are far less than would have been the case if they had manufactured in origin countries, we ourselves have to work in a manner that makes us completely competitive. If you're operating in Ghana and manufacturing, then your target should be less than the CIF landed value of goods in Port of Tema or Takoradi. Less, not at par when the border taxes are applied, because you really want to be truly competitive. So one of the ways in which we're looking at this situation is that if we're going to be export competitive, then and don't forget that for the initial period, we'll have to import some of the raw materials to produce the finished goods. Then we must be price competitive and quality competitive. So part of the technology adaptation program for industry that's embedded in what Mr. Nasser said in the value chains is to get us to become more precise, more quality driven, because whether or not people are railing against the EU latest deforestation and sustainability guidelines, even if Americans are railing against it, it may be temporary. They will probably end up implementing it. So we have to be ready to be able to access that market by meeting the standards that they require, whether it's traceability, whether it's pesticide residue, whatever it is. And so part of the schooling and training for this period on the 24-hour economy is to make ourselves not only volume ready, but quality ready. AGOA 2026, May, will it be there or will it not be there? I'm not confident. So the only way is to be competitive. Whatever barriers they put in, be competitive to be able to penetrate that market. And look at those goods that you do have a natural competitive advantage. For a lot of you who are in the cosmetic space, you'll see that gradually, shea butter and natural goods, essential oils and so on, are beginning to make a mark. They're not making a mark in terms of scale, but certainly in terms of quality and tracking the consumer preference for natural goods, origin goods from Africa and so on. Some of it is ethnic, some of it relates to particular segments of the US population. But even it's growing outside of the US population, ethnic population, to a wider market. Those are things that we need to pursue, perfect, and incentivize. So agua may not be there, but even if it's not there, we must be competitive to be able to send into our market. The EU, we are a bit worried about the EU because we see that the EU is flirting very actively with Mercosur and giving some of the benefits that we enjoy in terms of our EPA agreements with the EU to Mercosur, like bananas. Now, if you have a situation where Exotic is producing bananas under the partnership agreements, and you give the same tariff preference to a Mercosur country like Costa Rica, they may end up killing us. Because not only do they have scale, they've been at this thing forever, they subsidize, everybody knows that. So what it could mean, somebody called it diminishing preferences. So we have to look at that and talk to the EU and the UK. In fact, the UK is actively flirting with Mercosur as well. And the UK is a big important market for vegetables and fruit from Ghana. So we need to look at that and see how we can maintain our market presence and expand it, rather than have it diminished because of flirtations with other trade blocs that have advantages that we don't have immediately, but could have if the industry and the particular segments of the market production are allowed to grow. And I personally have been surprised, not by way of a criticism to the United Kingdom, but I have been surprised at the UK policy itself. Because the UK has a natural advantage in engaging with Africa. Language, cultural affinity, historic relationships in terms of markets, and a situation where the UK is out of the EU and probably not having a great time with the Americans, because the Americans are dead set on erecting tariff barriers, no matter whether there's a special partnership or relationship. I'd have thought that investment in Africa and expanding the African capacity, incomes, growth, jobs, becomes a natural source of growth for the UK economy itself. And not just as a financial sector, but even as a manufacturing point for UK industry. But we're not seeing that. And I think it's something that we all have to explore, UKCC have to explore, in terms of the possibility of this 425 million market that we all belong to, of which Ghana wants to be a hub. Because a lot of what we're trying to do is not just to look at the EU as a market, not look at the United States as a market, but also our own market, our own neighborhood with ECOWAS. Let me give you an example. The Southern European non-GMO soya crop ends around January, February. Then it's out, about 3 million tons. They end up, and of course the EU doesn't import GMO. So they look to Africa to give that supply, and to other parts of the world. That's a market for us. And our strategy is not just supply and produce edible oils and soya meal for the poultry industry, and also replace our imports of soya oil from abroad, but the excess is a market in Southern Europe who process for the rest of Europe. So that's an important arrangement. It's an important intervention into the EU. British industry could take advantage of that. Work with us to build that capacity into the EU and supply, because of the partnership agreements and the tariff preferences. So that if the Chinese are doing nearshoring, you might as well do the nearshoring as well. I don't know whether you've noticed, a lot of business parks emerging all over Accra and Tema. A lot of it is Chinese. And the surprising thing is that they're not just producing for export, they're producing for the local market and producing to sell back to China and sell to the United States. So there's a lot happening that we need to tap into. And that basically requires maybe a qualitatively different intervention in terms of FDI to support some of these initiatives in the agri-value chains and the manufacturing value chains that allows us to grow together as nations who have a historic affinity. Of course, the early relations were not too comfortable, and the discussions about reparations, which we'll talk about later. But there is also a historic opportunity to expand trade, grow trade, and also invest in the capacity that Ghana offers, not just in technology, but in terms of basic goods and services, consumer goods and consumer durables, that potentially can supply the world and supply West Africa. So yes, we're thinking about these things, but we're thinking about it slightly different from what people are thinking about in the traditional sense.
Indeed, I'm very clear for that. And, you know, that the UK government in Ghana has long celebrated that common history and shared values that our two countries enjoy.
But we want to see it in more investment.
Indeed. But there is an opportunity at the moment. The UK government is going through a consultation process on its New Africa approach. We're still through that consultation process. So certainly any comments, thoughts be fed to my colleagues at the embassy.
People, the JET and Palladium people are listening.
But that new approach to Africa will be announced later in the year. But it's one that's changing the relationship from sort of the donor-recipient to an equal partner, which is an encouraging and exciting opportunity. Just picking up on your issues for quality, in exporting to overseas markets, the standards that those markets demand are often very different from that which we see in Ghana. Even though Ghana produces world-class products, you often see things being let down by poor packaging, etc. What is the role of GIPA and Ghana Standards Board in terms of educating, supporting the private sector to understand those standards and achieve those standards?
Let me deal with GSA first. We have to do everything in our power to get GSA to be able to certify. ISO and other standards are required for entry into any market. We've had complaints from industry that they've sought standardization, affirmation, and certifications, and GSA has not been able to deliver, which I find surprising because GSA says they can do everything. So clearly, there's a lot of work that has to be done with GSA and an investment in GSA to be able then to certify so that when we are certified, we know that we can go anywhere with our products and they will pass the tests. Pharmaceuticals is one of our value chains as well. And fortunately for us, FDA is at level 3, but it needs to go further up and meet all the GMP requirements of the WHO so that we can increasingly manufacture those on the WHO list of essential drugs and also penetrate the West African market initially as our strategy. So investment in regulatory and standardization authorities like FDA and GSA is very important. We also have to get rid of this duplication and double, should I say conflict? Where you're in a situation where GSA is basically certifying and regulating the same thing as FDA, and that creates some confusion for industry as to who really should be doing the certification, and they end up paying double for the same work. So those kinds of problems need to be removed, and they need to be clear so that we can have simple mechanisms that meet the standards that we're all looking for. GEPA is really, if you like, if we're to use it properly, it should be a very strong marketing organization and presence, and working not only in terms of trade fairs and exhibitions and so on globally, but also working very closely with the foreign ministry. I think the Ghanaian foreign ministry has to begin to understand that it's a trade representative and not just simply a diplomatic institution. Because if you look at history, most diplomatic institutions have been about markets and fighting for markets and commercial advantage. And I think Ghana has to begin to understand that politics is basically, diplomacy is an extension of trade and trade policy, penetrating markets. And I think that the work of GEPA as a promoter of our exports, as a seeker of markets, as a exhibitionist or a platform for exhibition, and also creating technological platforms to advertise our goods and services to the rest of the world is important. We need to strengthen it. We need to tighten it up, especially because of this accelerated export development. And our hope is that within the next 3 or 4 years, we can add incrementally additional $200, $300, $400 million to the export revenue that we generate from existing as well as new products that will be emerging. But it's a lot of work, and GPA is central to that. And you're right, GSA, FDA, and all these standardization authorities are very key. And part of our work is also to support them, to invest in them, and make sure that they're responsive to industry and to the market, because everything we're doing is to satisfy a market. And I may add, research. This morning we had a very good discussion with CSIR, how we can integrate CSIR to become an important bedrock in our attempt to be able to achieve sustainability and self-reliance and transformation, and move a lot of what they've done off the shelf to prototypes, to industry, to real value products that can then allow us to achieve the kinds of self-sufficiency in food, particularly and basic industrial goods and consumer durable goods that will give us the advantage not only to produce for this economy, but to produce for West Africa and hopefully one day beyond West Africa. Thank you.
So accelerated exports, that's you guys, but you're going to need access to finance, and we often hear within the continents that is one of the biggest barriers to doing business. Now, Ghana's got a number of institutions, agencies that do support finance. Ghana Exim has been mentioned on this on the screen. We also have Gersal here to support the agricultural sector. How do you see those institutions, agencies changing to respond to this initiative, this program?
If you look at Gersal and you look at Exim Credit, sadly, if you look at the balance sheets of most banks, including CAL's, the exposure to agricultural credit, I think it's less than 7% or 5% of their balance sheets of all commercial loans given by the universal banks. The exposure to exports is about 7%. You're not going to get any accelerated export development or growth of an economy on a sustained basis with this kind of record. So one of the things we have tried to do is to see how we can improve the environment by the SME on-lending program that we're introducing, initially 500 million, hopefully eventually to $1 billion and then beyond as the program rolls out. So we can get tenor, longer tenors. I mean, Ghanaians are fixated with working capital, 3-month cycles and 1-year cycles. It's as if working capital has to be 1 year. You know, if you want to grow any economy, you need expansion and growth capital, and you need patient capital. And that's what we're trying to infuse in the system with the concessional facilities that we're seeking and the on-lending facilities that we'll be working with some of the center banks to be able to invest based on agreed protocols and agreed disbursement criteria. And I hate to say this, even though I'm a politician, is to remove the politics out of Exim Bank and all these other institutions so that they assume credibility and assume, because they assume credibility and are seen as geared towards their functional discharge of their mandate rather than supplying goods and credit to politicians and favored partisans, then they also will be able to attract credit and support and be able to contribute to the expansion of this economy. But yes, Exim is very key. It was a policy bank. Ghana is not the only country that has a policy bank. Chinese have policy banks to grow their economy, and Exim will play that important role. Fortunately, when the government is not raiding it because they're short of cash, they also have a firm source of deductions from imports to fund Exim with long-term money. So hopefully, once some of the problems that they faced over the last 8 years have been cleaned out, Exim should assume a very central role in what we're trying to do, together with DBG and other banks that may wish to participate in the 24-hour SME on-lending term program. Gersal is key, and I believe DBG also has established or is about to establish a subsidiary for guarantees for MSMEs. That's very, very key because you see, it's a primitive economy of the 12th century that relies on hard assets as collateral to lend. I'm sorry I have to say this, but it's a fact. We are not in the 12th century. We are not going to grow our economy where most people have no property at all and cannot access property to collateralize a loan. So if we're thinking people, if we're serious about growing this economy, then we must look at other ways to secure and mitigate risk and secure the balance sheets of the cows of the world so that they don't have increasing NPLs. One way to do it, and I want to bring this to your attention, is insurance. Credit insurance. Many years ago, when I was very active in exporting sorghum and groundnuts to Netherlands. By the way, the sorghum was a bit of a disaster. The Australians were bringing sorghum at less than our prices, even though we're right next door. But we tried anyway. HSBC was able to give us funding without any hard collateral, just an assignment of LC proceeds. And they pre-financed the LC, and it worked very well. In Ghana, that's impossible, because the Bank of Ghana will not allow it. They don't see assignment of proceeds and receivables as collateral. Even though the person may have been doing it for the last century, they just don't see it. Those things have to change. And probably a way out is a credit insurance fund that allows for insurance of credits so the banks don't fall flat because they're basically trying to grow the economy in a risk-mitigated way. So when the insurance people came to see us, we said they have to start thinking about a fund and tap it into the premiums that they charge, and maybe get government also to provide seed funding so we can build maybe an insurance fund of $400–500 million that is able then to support the growth sectors that we see in this economy. Because after light industry and after agri-processing and venture and agribusiness, your next stage is heavy industry. It's steel and it's aluminum. And the banks have to be ready for that, because you know the impact of aluminum in this economy. Can produce more than 90,000 direct jobs and several 100,000 indirect jobs. If we can get our act together and integrate, as GIDEC has been saying, from bauxite to alumina to aluminum, and then to the downstream, which is even more valuable than the upstream. So, and of course, steel for fabrication and machinery and equipment manufacture. So there's a role for EXIM, there's a role for DBG, there's a role for CAL, but we have to change the mentality and the instruments that we use. And we must make more use of the stock exchange and the listing of debts. I was very encouraged to see Casa Precon list, I think, 300 million of debt. Interesting experiment. I hope it works. If we at the 24-hour economy are successful in achieving food self-sufficiency and improving supply chain and market systems, then I'm sure we'll also be responsible and part of the team, together with what the Ministry of Finance is doing, to bring down food price inflation, which is an important component of our general inflation. Stabilize inflation, lower interest rates, and basically allow for cheaper credit, and with credit insurance from insurance companies, supported by a fund, longer-term capital, so our economies and our businesses can grow and expand. If you are supporting an exporter is trying to penetrate the Ivorian market, for example, it's a very hard thing. They are basically competing with 100 years of French imports, or 200 years. Mindsets about what is good, what is quality. In Ghana, if somebody sees something that is made in Ghana and something that is made in, say, Germany, even though the quality may be the same and the Ghanaian product may be slightly cheaper, they'll buy the German one. Also, we're not going to get anywhere with that. We have to overcome that. That's why we have the mindset program. But we have to push. We have to market. We're in an era where people create markets with social media and so on. We can do the same. We can change the mindset. But the production must be there. And without finance, there's no production. Without financial intimidation, there's no production. Without the right kind of finance, there's no long-term sustainability. So we all have to work together to sort out this financing issue. Costs, tenor, and collateralization. The banks even don't syndicate. to share the risk. And even securitize. I mean, I'm sure people will be more willing to take a syndicated securitization on the exchange than the government of Ghana bond. You could do it. Government of Ghana cannot do it because they don't have the credibility anymore until they begin to restore and pay back and keep faith with the DDEP and so on. But you can. And you need to think about that to raise long-term capital. Thank you.
Yeah, and it's interesting you raised the Ghana Stock Exchange, because for me that's also areas of collaboration, partnerships with other stock exchanges to mobilize capital into Ghana through that route.
Before the crisis, people were talking about listing things on AIM and so on, and then once the debt crisis occurred, everything disappeared. It went whoosh. Yeah. We need to gradually crawl back and get going on that as well. Thank you.
You raised a topic that often moderators don't want to go, but as you've raised it, I will go there. You talked about the politicization of access to support. And again, this is a constant comment I've heard over the years in Ghana. How do you build up the trust from the private sector to say, I'm going to do this and I'm not going to face the political challenges that I've faced historically? Is it going to be done through transparency on eligibility to this access, or how is it going to be done?
I think transparency is very important, because without transparency, trust is very difficult to establish and to maintain. And one of the things that the 24-hour economy program with the accelerated export component is in our institutional arrangements, get the private sector on board. And they will see from the demonstration of the program, it's their program. And basically make sure that whatever credits go in their support, the trade associations and industry groups are part of the protocol setting, are part of the regulation, are part of the self-regulation, and part of the imposition of discipline. I think that's a very important start. For the Exim banks of the world and so on, I believe they've learned their lessons. I mean, you have a situation where they've been hit very hard by political loans, if I may describe them. And it's not unique, but it's happened. And it's something that has to be overcome. And the way to do it is through transparency and engaging with the public. You see, one of the great things about crisis is that if you don't want your people to be barking at you and throw you out, the best way is to talk to them and engage them and be frank and honest with them. If we can achieve that in this period, Ghanaians are very resilient people. If you tell them the truth, or most of the truth, they'll probably go along with you. But if you hide, you do what you say you're going to do. If you don't walk the talk, they'll come after you. And I belong to a generation who have seen some serious coming after, and we don't want to see that again. We want our economy to grow. We want it to be stable. We want the private sector to assume its proper role as a generator of wealth, not for just a few, for the majority. Create jobs for the 2.1 million people who are out of work, 8.2 million in vulnerable work. Today they have a job, tomorrow they don't have a job. And make sure that this group who are recording statistics of 29% out of work, unemployment, 15 to the age of 29, also have work. Because that's where your revolution is going to come from if you don't take care of it. And you can't afford, in that context, for public institutions to be less than transparent, public institutions to violate their mandate, to achieve and pursue partisan agendas, which in the end unravel the very purpose for which they have been established, to grow this economy sustainably and expand the economy in partnership with the private sector. I must say, Exim has done a lot. They've treaded spaces where commercial banks will not go, and they can do more if we don't basically burden them with these requirements to support political loans and so on and so forth. I'm not saying that it's impossible in any environment. The United States is probably the most classic example, where you see senators lobbying for loans for their businesses in their jurisdictions and so on. It happens. But it must be done on a rational, commercial basis so that the outcomes are positive for the lender as well as for the borrower and for the general economy. If you're going to put public money in people's hands, then basically you've socialized the risk. So the reward also must be socialized. So if Exim is going to support big private companies, then at some point we have to tell the private companies, okay, you have 100% of your product, your business. We supported you this far. Maybe unload 2 or 3% onto the exchange so we can deepen and widen the exchange so that other people can benefit. This is the kind of thinking we have with the 24-hour economy, to answer your question.
Thank you very much. I know what you wanted to get out of today's session was to hear from the private sector.
Definitely.
So they've heard enough from us. Let's hear from you the questions that you may have with all that you've heard this afternoon. When you do ask a question, can you introduce yourself and the company that you represent, please? So, George.
All right, thank you very much for the wonderful presentations and discussions. I'm really moved, but it has reminded me of when I was around 12 years or thereabout. I want to...
Name and company?
Oh, okay, Crocodile Machete, Dr. Charles Etuachine. So I went to Ghana Library Board to get some books to read, and I chanced on a magazine. And I remember Kofi Boahin also has written in that magazine. For me, I do not have time organizing symposiums and so on and so forth. Ghanaians have fantastic ideas. They always organize symposiums, but they will never implement them. I wish these ideas are implemented. Anyway, Crocodile Match, I want to be part of the 24-hour economy. I have my business card here. I'll give to you. Chairman, I will also let you have it. We want to be seriously part of this 24-hour economy.
It's your program. It's a private sector program. It's
yes,
yours.
yes. So we want to be part. We are serious. I've been asked to come here to inform you that I want to be part of the 24-hour economy. All right, thank you. I heard you mention that VAT rate is 21.9%.
Effective rate about 22.
VAT rate is 30.3%. We forget that we pay 6.9%, and that government take it free. And after we have processed, we pay 21.9%, making it 30.3%. I was thinking the budget is going to remove it, but it appears that place is juicy environment, so everybody's quiet, nobody's talking about it. And that is fueling manufacturing inflation. If you look at it for the past 4 years, manufacturing inflation is very, very high. It's because of that. So if you want to bring manufacturing inflation down, you have to remove that 6% levy from the manufacturing cost, and it will come down automatically without struggling. Right. Also, another program of exporting is what we call LOC, letter of credit, letter of commitment. You know, now what they have is that if you have to export within 60 days, you have to bring the proceeds back. But here's the case: even your goods will be at the port for 45 days already. You know, let alone vessel come in and load the goods and send it away. Already 60 days is gone. So you may look at that aspect, LOC with the 60 days, payment. Sometimes you're right, they give you an extension of 30 days, but for me, it's waste of time. It delays businesses and so on and so forth. Sometimes before you get approval, the vessel has come and gone. So look at that aspect, critically. And also, when you talk about we are already, for instance, we are producing 24/7 already, with the exception of Sunday, some few hours, here and there. We have the export experiences already. So when it comes to export, another program is ECOWAS implementation and after implementation. So truly, if you want to achieve your export growth, you have to look at after and then ECOWAS scheme, how they are working. Nigeria is a stumbling block. You can't go there. You go there, you are good. Sometimes will be at the port for 8 months and it will not be cleared. And here's the case, I've gone for a loan, and the bank will be chasing you, thinking that, oh, you have used their loan to buy, their fund to buy, Mercedes-Benz. The goods is locked up at Nigeria, 8 months. It's not being cleared. So you may look at that aspect, then we see how it goes. Thank you very much. I have a lot, more than 1,000, but let me end here.
Thank you. Okay, on the VAT, I believe the Minister of Finance announced that the whole regime is being looked at to rationalize it. Because you're right, the impact and the incidence is really militating against business growth and also price competitiveness because of the cost impacts in the cost build-up of companies. So you're right, but it's not that it's juicy. It has to be done very carefully because of the way in which the layers were added from the original 15% to add COVID and all that. So I think by the mid-year review, we should have some position. The IMF is sending a special team to work with the government in rationalizing that regime so that the effective rate comes down to what it originally was. With the LOC, one of the problems with Ghana is that we tend to over-regulate because there are problems. A lot of companies sign the LOC. I give you an example. Cashew is about $1,200 per ton. CIF Vietnam, or CNF Vietnam, or CNF Cochin, or wherever in India. They declare on the LOC that the price of cashew is $600. So they basically under invoice. Even the $600, they don't bring it back. Because what you have is that people here who have excess cedis who want to basically get foreign exchange because they want to pay their dividends or something. They finance it, declare LOCs that are misleading and wrong and fraudulent, and the monies don't come back in any case. And because of that, because of those problems, we've over-regulated the whole idea, and you are stuck at the port for 60 days. Those are some of the things we're trying to do, to get rid of all these problems that are associated with both imports and exports. So we have a single window clearance system where there's interface with the banks, interface with customs, interface with Bank of Ghana, and whoever has an approving role. So it's on one platform, everybody can see it, and therefore we can then look at the companies and who's doing the right thing and who's not doing the correct thing. So you who's doing the correct thing are not penalized and create a more efficient system. There are many other problems, and the idea is to create a 24-hour export corridor and strategic import corridor at the port. And that's something that we're going to work with the Port of Ghana to do. So the clearance system is quick. I mean, you can't. There's no country in the world that can do 100% check on goods that are coming in or going out. You have to build algorithms that allows you to do random checking and make sure that you are able to capture your revenue. But if you try to do 100, of course you're going to stay at the port for 60 days or 100 days and so on. So that's that. On the ETLS and ECOWAS, that's a big problem. And Nigeria is a bigger problem. So our advice is that if you can find markets other than Nigeria, let's penetrate those markets. Yeah, but they're also a big market in Africa. AFTA allows us to do much more than the 200 million people in Nigeria. And that's a strategy we're pursuing. Whilst we talk to the Nigerians to live up to and meet their responsibilities under the ECOWAS rule. Nigeria is stuck in the old, it's a bit like Donald Trump, stuck in the old mercantile view of the world. That if I raise my tariff barriers, I can then, improve my standing as a global trader by protecting and shutting out everybody. But at the end of the day, their economies suffer, and you've seen it for yourself. It suffered seriously. Recently, you couldn't even, if you're exporting palm oil to Nigeria, you couldn't, because today, exchange rate is 1,000 naira per dollar. Tomorrow is 1,700, and it's back to 1,200, and you don't know what's going on. So erecting trade barriers unreasonably and irrationally is not the way to go. And Nigeria hasn't, unfortunately, learned that. And we have to push as member states in the ECOWAS for them to assume responsibility in that regard. So it is a problem. And we're not going to solve that problem today. So we have to look for other markets that allows you to be paid when you supply within the 30-day or 60-day window. One of the ways in which Exim can help, if we really are running a true Exim bank, is to be able to discount your proceeds and give you the money. And then and Carl, you can join Exim to do this. And then when you get paid, then it's set off. And then you have your cash flow to continue to expand and grow your business. So, and that's something that we have to think about. Because if you're going to penetrate the West African market, then you better have an Exim bank that will support your industries to sell out, whether it's aluminum pots and pans, whether it's crocodile machete, or whatever it is. So a lot of thinking has to go into how we set ourselves up to penetrate the West African market, particularly in regard to financial intermediation, and that allows for payment to cover for the lag. Because the farmer people who are having the same thing. They supply the country, I don't want to name the country, for 2 years, they haven't been paid. And it's a government institution. So we have to find ways and means out of that. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we have a question over here.
I just had a quick point, and then I think Kwamna is going to talk about money, which is probably more important.
That's very nice.
Money is very important. So I just wanted to
Nana,
thank you very much.
Name and organization.
Oh, my name. My name is Nana Frimpoma Ahin. I work at the British High Commission. I lead a work on economic transformation, which is what we've been talking about today. I just wanted to endorse the issue of the reforms and the single sort of make it easier for people to do business. I think oftentimes we talk a lot about finance, which is obviously very important, but I think I'm hearing the gentleman around the machetes as well, and a range of people. This morning we were at the World Bank recently released Be Ready business report, and we're looking at things like cost build-up. And so it's easy to look at, say, things like tax to GDP as Ghana is slightly lower than other countries. But when you look at the other elements of the cost build-up that a business has to face, the number of days they have to do this, the number of days they have to do that, it's a lot. And I think that relates to a heart and mind thing, but also as an accountability thing. So I think my question or my comment was really about how can we make sure that we support the 24-hour economy to have both the sort of the benchmarks. What are the benchmarks that we want to have? So in 6-7 areas, you know, like the president and yourself are saying, this is the benchmark that Ghana holds itself to, and a signal. It will take time to reform the system, but these benchmarks will be very, very important in terms of those reforms, but also the accountability around that. Who are you holding to account? What happens when people don't do what they're supposed to do? Because we've been around over 10 years trying to reform, and it hasn't really happened. So I think for me, it was going back to say hearts and minds within the public service, accountability, which is both the private sector pushing government, but also government pushing itself, but also the benchmarks that we can really measure transparently to say, well, actually, these institutions are not really meeting and ensuring that the cost is lowered for business. So that's my really non-finance issue. But I think it's almost like we have to create like a reform war room. I'm looking at an example of Rwanda, for example. I'm looking for examples of countries where it can be done, but it's quite a brutal approach to reform where you have these benchmarks and you're not compromising on the benchmarks. So that was a sort of a kind of comment / question, or that it's difficult, but I know that it can be done, but requires almost a certain level of deliberateness and a kind of like almost a war mentality footing to say, and also there's the system of regulations that we have at the moment. So people can use, and I really love the idea that you came up with, the fact that people regulate because they are worried that private sector is up to no good. So that's the kind of mentality, right? So the private sector is really bad. They're up to no good. All these people making lots of money. So we need to check them because they are hiding something. And sometimes they are hiding things, but not always. Sometimes that's the level, but then we overregulate. So examples from Mexico where they had like the regulatory guillotine, where they say for every regulation that a private, an institution like a Ministry of Trade or Standard Board, they have to cut 2 more. You can keep piling on requirements on private sector, so the kind of regulatory guillotine approach. And that actually strangely enough, spared the kind of the auto industry in Mexico because they lowered regulation. Of course, you can also get in a situation where you lower regulation too much, and then you have too many cowboys. So balancing that will be very important as well.
So Nana, was your question, where did you want, which KPI do you want to offer technical support to the office?
All of them. We would like to see a regulatory guillotine approach.
Let me try.
Thank you.
First of all, for a key component of the program is enhanced productivity towards price competitiveness. Because I don't think it's fair to ask Ghanaians to eat Nana rice. Sorry, I shouldn't mention any trademark. To eat Ghana rice if it's 1.5 times the cost of landed Thai rice. So we have to make sure that our cost build-up makes us competitive. That's the first thing. So one of the key metrics is, are we being competitive based on our costing? From farm gate all the way to your table. From the seed, farm maintenance, extension, all the components that get the rice onto from the milling to your table. So that's one fundamental metric that any businessman must undertake. And our role is to support business people to understand this, build it, and through the agroecological zones, hopefully achieve the levels of scale and economies that allows these lowering of costs to occur and achieve better pricing for our products. So that's number one. If you want to penetrate other markets, then you have to benchmark also what other countries are doing. So if you want to export 25% broken rice to Sierra Leone, then you must know what the Pakistanis are doing to be able to export 25% broken rice competitively. So you also have to know what pricing is going on with your competitors. That's number one. Number two. 3, how do we know whether the program is succeeding or not? So the work we've been doing in the last 3 or 4 months is working with Ghana Statistical Service to give us what we call a results framework, indexing various components of economic activity that we're going to be involved in through the program and determine whether we are positive, going negative, or at par. And that will be part of the program. The results framework will be attached to the program as aspirations that we intend to achieve, so that you have the metrics and our ability to meet them or not. But, madam, if you want to achieve anything in this life, sometimes you have to be brutal, but in a good way. Not by striking people with hammers over their heads, but making them see that the alternative is bleak and worse. And I think we've reached that point. So in terms of streamlining regulations at the port, streamlining taxes so they make more sense, are rational, make us more competitive, remove the element of corruption, because the more you overregulate, the more you are inviting corruption. If you need 19 approvals, believe me, somebody in that chain is going to ask you for money, because you can't wait to go through all the 19 approvals. So somewhere along the line, people collect money and they facilitate and help you to do the wrong thing, basically. So one of the coordinating components, I understand GRA has set up a 24-hour desk. By the time we finish with education and so on, there'll be several 24-hour desks. We're working with GIPC. They were with us 2 days ago with their program. And the idea is to coordinate and remove some of these bottlenecks, make it more rational. Regulation is important. The danger is over-regulation. And that's what is happening in Ghana. And we need to get it out of the way so we can progress and expand this economy. So brutality is good, but it's brutality that must be with a soft touch and a coordinating component that allows people to actually come to the table and feel the desire to work and improve systems so that companies can grow, businesses can grow, farmers can grow, cooperatives can grow, and exports can grow.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Go on.
My name is Kwabena
Are
Santipoku.
you going to announce the $500 million?
I'm the country director for British International Investments. About 18 months ago, we set up an SME finance company. We dedicated about $50 million to that company. So far, that company has disbursed to about 8 Ghanaian companies. At steady state, we expect that we would invest in 50 to 60 Ghanaian companies. We're looking to mobilize money from local pension funds and other DFIs as well. I guess my ask is for the 24-hour secretariat to work with the Ghana Venture Capital Association, the National Pension Regulatory Authority, and SEC to ensure that we get more homegrown Ghanaian private equity funds that can invest in Ghanaian economies. That's just my ask.
Very important. Agreed entirely.
In the interest of time, 2 more questions, and then we'll go to closing.
Sure, thanks, Steve. So my name is Elom Segbefi. I also work with the British, it looks like the British are doing all the talking here, High Commission. So I lead on our domestic revenue mobilization program with the Ghana Revenue Authority and the Ministry of Finance. And I just wanted to add a bit to what Nana asked, and I think Mr. Tanoh had sort of answered it, but I just wanted to stress that from my experience driving institutional reform, this program is critically important, and it makes sense at every level to me as I sit here. But the thing is the incentives of people who go up to the president. Clearly, the president runs the country, and I want to believe that he's on board. And you've listed a lot of institutions, a lot of them, GSA, EXIM, FD, lots of them. Now, what's the incentives of all the people who lead these organizations? Because ultimately, if I am the chief exec of EXIM, and whatever I engage your team on passes here and goes through here, you are in trouble. If what I can do is to bring some middle-level managers to engage the 24 economy secretary just to take a box and make everybody happy, we are in trouble. So I like Nana's point about brutal, because if we are not brutal, we won't get nowhere. So for example, you have a minister and he has loads of agencies under him. And I'm being practical with my governance appreciation of institutional reform. So you go to cabinet, the president says this is absolutely important. The minister goes down, meets his agency chiefs, tells them this is absolutely important. They also go down, they have to deal with directors and blah. So you have a lot of people in the chain where dependencies relate. And the thing about leadership at these levels is that you cannot always hold the whip and be chasing people. You want to be clear that once I land it, it becomes a priority. So I think that, again, my experience in development tells me that it fails or it succeeds is the political economy. Who are the blockers? Who are those who are supporting it? I think chances of success is you ensure that everybody leading every agency, ministry, at this point T, thinks like potentially Mr. Tanoh thinks. And that's the point I keep making, that you need specific type of thinkers at a point T to achieve a result Y. So if it's economic transformation, then potentially we want to be sure that everybody who is running a decision-making process in this whole program thinks same. If not, I think the beautiful program as designed will start to struggle because of the political economy, because of the blockers, because of the varied interest. And you know how it goes. People can just kick you down the road. Meetings upon meetings, emails upon emails. Tomorrow we'll meet, we couldn't meet, it rained, it this and it that, and 2 years is gone, and 3 years is gone, and it never happened. So anyway, I just want to say that I think it's very critical.
I think what you said is...
No, I was going to ask the last person to ask the last question and then allow you to wrap it up as an answer. So, sorry. Okay.
I'll be very quick because I know time is short. Let me make an offer. We can demonstrate we can save up to 40% of your costs in your agro-ecological parks with our Ghana-made inputs. So we're here to be talked to.
What's the organization?
Sorry, Henry Abraham, CEO of HG Africa, who make organic agro input called Offer. So
Good, wonderful.
So
good to hear that. Okay, so can I answer the question? We will come to you definitely, and you can also come to us. But we would like to work together with innovation and innovators, because some of the agrochemicals that are being distributed to farmers are killers. They not only killing the soil, killing the human beings themselves who are applying. So we'll discuss definitely. In history, there'll be moments when generations and elements in generations have come together to recognize a crisis and the need to transform. The Turks did it. The Americans did it with the New Deal. The British did it post-war with the Attlee government in laying the foundations of the welfare state. The Chinese did it with Deng. We also can do it. The Germans did it after the war. The Japanese did it after the war. Rwanda is doing it now, more or less. And I believe we also have the mettle and the capacity to do that. But you see, we designed the program in such a way that if you want to block us, then you have to go and seize the private sector company and block them. That's why it's really a private sector program. And we're raising money to support the private sector. And the commitment we have is fully understood that it's going to the private sector. And the protocols that will guide it, the support and risk mitigants and so on, are going to be designed together with the private sector and the on-lending institutions. So in that sense, even if people want to block, the reality is that the implementation is being done by the private sector. And there are institutions and organizations that are available, ready within the private sector, within the public sector, who want to be part of the program and wish to be part of the coordinating framework. And we'll adapt them and work with them. Is the president on board? It's the president's flagship program. He speaks about it all the time. And I believe that he's very much on board and very committed. And I believe the president wants to leave a legacy. And that legacy is the early roots and buds arising from this transformation program. So I can see it within his administration, and that also becomes a platform for expansion and growth. We went to a big development finance institution like you. They think it's potentially a great program. But they asked us, why are you making a 10-year program? Make it 25 years, because this is what is going to drive the change. So this program, and I'll couch it for everybody to understand, it's a citizens program, not a partisan program. It's a citizens program. It's for the Ghanaian people and their private sector to implement, to be resourced, so that we will end up, hopefully, touch wood, with the bureaucracy chasing us to be more efficient and responsive, because the private sector is moving at pace. That's how we've designed the program. Thank you very much.
So, please, yes. So, ladies and gentlemen, I think we all have a new perception of what 24-hour economy means. It's not working 3 shifts.
Streetlights.
It's an ambitious program. It's clearly a program that's, I heard myself a few weeks ago at the National Economic Dialogue, the president talking about resetting Ghana's economy to be a breakout nation by 2050. This program is a pathway to delivering that legacy. And it requires us in the private sector to do more, to be more honest in our declarations that we've heard today, but also for us to demand the transparency from governments to ensure that business is not politicized in a way that we've seen some institutions in the past being done so. So I would ask you to put your hands together to thank Mr. Tanoh and his team for an excellent session. Indeed, please, the team can stand and... So look for them. They're the people of the future. And it would be remiss not to acknowledge CalBank for very kindly hosting this evening. The discussion continues with a networking event after here, but also I'd like to thank Ajoba and the team at the UK Ghana Chamber of Commerce for putting this together. Thank you.
Responsible. Effective. Decisive. No matter how times may change, these values that we share remain the same. They have kept us strong and financially reliable over the years, and they reflect our unwavering commitment to empowering your journey toward a stronger tomorrow. CalBank, forward together.
The Pan-African Payment and Settlement Systems represents a monumental leap in the realm of cross-border payments and settlement systems. Now let me give you the key reasons why you must choose CalBank as the bank for all your cross-border payments across Africa. At CalBank, we recognize that security is of paramount importance to our customers. The PAPS system incorporates robust security measures, ensuring the integrity of each transaction and safeguarding sensitive financial information. We also understand that time is a precious commodity in today's fast-paced world. PAPS, with its real-time settlement capabilities, expedites transactions, reducing processing time significantly. We value your time, and our commitment to efficiency is unwavering. CalBank has always been at the forefront of embracing digital transformation. We have invested heavily in state-of-the-art technology and infrastructure, ensuring that our customers have access to a wide array of digital channels. PAPS integrates seamlessly into our digital ecosystem and provides our customers with unparalleled convenience, enabling them to conduct transactions anytime, anywhere with just a few clicks. Finally, we pride ourselves on fostering strong relationships with our customers. Our relationship banking system is unparalleled. We firmly believe that personalized attention and exceptional service are the hallmarks of a truly customer-centric institution. With CalBank as your partner, you are assured of top-notch customer service in your PAPS journey. CalBank, forward together.